a show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Good to have you with us here on Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata. Our guest this evening, is Sean Lang, president of Interprovincial Roof Consultants. We're talking, Tony Giventu and I, about the evolution of major construction projects in condominium and strata environments, obviously with a focus on roofing, because we're lucky to have Sean join us in the studio. But Tony, we were talking about the process, and we were just about to get into bidding and all of that. Sean has identified that he prefers a minimum, for example, of 5 bids when the tender is put out. But get us to that tender point.
I think the Strata Corporation needs to know that the whole process of having a scope of work and tenders is so that they have some assurances that what they actually want is what they're going to get at the end.
Right.
Right? It's not just a contractor saying, I'll replace your roof for you and you're going to get what you're going to get. We're actually telling you what we want. Our consultant is writing a specification that you have to give us a proposed price on.
Right. Based on some very, very specific requirements.
Very specific requirements.
Right.
They're going to be very specific conditions, and Sean, you can help out here, but there'll be things like the mechanics of the bid, where it has to be delivered, who receives them, the time it's going to be opened, whether the lowest bid will be accepted or not, whether any bid will be accepted or not, whether bonding is going to be required. There are going to be a number of insurance, a number of conditions, what kind of warranty is going to be required in the contract with the contractor.
All that's outlined in the general conditions of the specification, because the front end of it is a tender form, basically. It outlines all the conditions. It goes right down to whether or not they can smoke on the project, or stuff like that. So we try to cover every aspect of the process, and any other clauses that the owners of the complex might want incorporated into that document can be added as well. So there's special parking concerns. Those are all noted in there, so that the contractor is bound by that once he submits a bid.
Well, you see special concerns also for landscaping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially for some of the townhouse complexes we have spectacular landscaping.
Absolutely.
Right, and it's a huge value for them. So protection of landscaping.
Times they can work.
Times
days
they can work. Whether they can have radios on site that are playing sound. Right. Language, the acceptability of language, where latrines or services like that are going to be held. Storage for materials. All of those things. You can't go back and renegotiate those without some cost or implications afterwards.
So all the more reason, Sean, to be organized up front. The more specific you can be about the information in your bid, the more specific you can require those bidding on your project to be, the more likely you are to be able to bring your project in close to budget.
Yeah, and it's also very important that the choice of who bids on the project is made by the right individual. Because if you just call in somebody's brother who happens to be a roofer. So this guy might be a guy with a pickup truck and a hammer and a pouch, and he's going to come in because he's been roofing for a while and bid on this process. But in reality, when we're looking at the scope of work, we're also looking at who's going to do this work. So when we choose those 5 contractors, we're choosing contractors that are qualified, they have the proper journeyman on site, they've been trained, they have the right equipment. So if there's hoists and cranes that are needed, they either have access to them or they have them themselves. And they know how to get jobs like this done. They've done many of them.
Sure.
And even in our case, we use contractors that have done many with us. So they know our processes and our requirements and what we're going to be looking for. So it allows the project to go a lot smoother. So this works well for the owners of the strata, because now the guesswork is taken out. They don't have to wonder. And in fact, I always tell people, if we've chosen the 5 contractors, low bid gets the job. Unless there's an error on the tender form, there's no reason not to take low bid, because everybody's been pre-qualified.
Right.
So the guesswork is taken out. You don't know that Johnny's Roofing is a good contractor or not a good contractor. We can pre-qualify that.
Right.
That also ensures the fairest process for the contractors.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it protects the Strata Corporation from lawsuits for not accepting a lowest bid when they should have taken the lowest bid because they've have some other agreement or arrangement with another contractor.
Here's a phrase that I'm unfamiliar with. Tony, what is bid walking?
Well, it's a term that is used when you have the confidentiality of bids that were given by contractors, where you have an individual, every now and then it pops up as a council member who has a friend who has a company, and they will take those bids and share them, even though they are confidential and proprietary.
Oh.
They will share them with another contractor that they want, who will be able to cater their bid so that it will beat everyone else's marginally to ensure that they can get the job. It's unlawful. It's an incredibly dangerous process, and your Strata Corporation will get sued if you do this.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. So we do have lawsuits where this occurs. So it's not in anyone's interest.
Who does the suing? The contractors that should have got the job because they've gone
that's
through
what'll
the
happen.
tendering process?
That's
The
what'll
contractor
happen.
and the consultant can sue because
Yeah.
the tender form and the specification is actually a proprietary document that's owned by the consultant.
Confidential stuff
It's
there.
leased to the Strata or whoever has hired the consultant for that particular building. And the risk in somebody taking that document and using it or bidding on it without our involvement is we can't deal with any particular issues that come up or any questions that come up that may arise out of that document.
Right.
And if that document falls into the wrong hands and gets used on a project without the consultant being involved, then if there's errors due to the specification, which is a specific document,
Right.
being used on another building that it wasn't designed for, and something happens down the road, somebody could take that document or some lawyer could say, well, it was done to an interprovincial document, but we weren't involved.
Right.
So we actually have to protect ourselves in the sense that if that document's misused, it can cause us grief down the road.
Well, and the Strata side of this is if an owner does this or a council member does this, they get bids and then they go to other contractors.
Yeah.
Or worse yet, they own a construction company and they underbid the process for their own personal benefit.
Right.
They're in all kinds of conflicts under the legislation. The problem is it throws your Strata Corporation into turmoil. It breeds mistrust. There is now conflict in the Strata. People don't want to serve on Strata Council. There's all kinds of accusations. Lawsuits mount. Do a clean contracting process that's impartial, where you have independent contractors, you have independent consultants, and where you have some separation between the facts of what are being presented and the decision making, and the Strata Corporation will save itself an enormous amount of grief.
And based on your experience, both of you, what are the other typical pitfalls or problem areas that Strata councils or Strata owners fall into in this renovation process? And again, with a view to roofing particularly, Sean.
Pitfalls, that's a tough one to come up with off the top of my head.
Okay.
But basically...
Mistakes, perhaps, then?
Yeah, it goes to lack of preparation is probably the biggest one.
Okay.
Because it does take a certain amount of time to get this whole process going. And you know, we've talked about this before where somebody will call in and say, or call us and say, well, we need a roof done and we need it done tomorrow. Well, it takes us roughly a month from the day we're hired till we can get prices back to you. And that's a good period of time. Sometimes it'll take longer if we're busy because we can't get to your project right away.
Right.
We have a backlog. We have other people that we have to work for. So by the time we start the business of dealing with your building, we have to go out. We have to look at your roof. We have to take all the information. Then we have to come back and write a document. Then we have to proof that document. Then that document gets sent back to the owner for them to proof it, make sure they're happy with it. Then that document a tender call is put out, which is usually a week following. So we give the contractors a week to plan, to be there, to meet on site with us. So we host a meeting on site.
Oh, okay, all right.
Right? And we go over the roof system. We go over the documents.
So everybody's connected to
everybody's
this.
clear on it.
Right, okay.
Then they need at least 2 weeks to formulate prices.
Sure.
Because
okay.
if it's a large project, they can't just look at it and give you a price. They have to
Right.
measure it.
Sure.
And if they don't measure it, they're not giving you an accurate figure.
Right.
So we need to give them the time. So it usually takes a month at the least to get those prices back. And then those bids are typically good for 60 days. So the process is about that long. And if starting it earlier is the best way to go. For instance, if a Strata wants to get the roof done during the summer, which is obviously the best time, starting the spring, finish in the fall,
right.
They should be planning the previous year in the fall.
Oh, so they should have been working on this in September.
They should have called us in
spring
September
2014,
or October.
last fall. Right,
exactly.
Okay.
At least start talking with us, start discussing what they'd like to do, where they'd like to go. Is it a cedar complex? They want to convert it to asphalt shingle. Let's talk about it. And we're happy to get in small and start working our way. And our costs are very low in the beginning.
Right.
It's only when the actual project gets underway that the costs mount.
Right.
The consulting fees are really trivial when you look at the overall cost of the project.
And again, mistakes, Tony, just from your experience?
Well, I think the biggest mistake Strata corporations have is they only have so much money in the pot.
Yep.
Why spend it twice? Why are you waiting till your roofing systems or your plumbing systems or electrical systems, elevators, any components in your building have failed before you are replacing them? It just simply inflates costs enormously. You have no control over when they're going to get done.
All right. choa.bc.ca for the condominium homeowners. Sean, your website at Interprovincial.
iprc.ca.
iprc.ca. Good to have you back, Sean.
Yeah, good to see you too.
Tony, we'll get together in a few weeks.
We will. Good fun as always.
Thanks for joining us on Quay Pacific's Talk About Strata.
Has your Strata Corporation experienced a